From this Airbus A350, which crashed into a Coast Guard jet during landing in Japan, and this DHL cargo jet that skidded off the runway and snapped in half after losing control, to this private jet that lost both engines, forcing the pilot to land on a highway, and much more. Here are some of the worst plane landing failures caught on camera. On April 7th of 2022, a DHL Boeing 757 took off from Juan Santa Maria International Airport in San Jose, Costa Rica, bound for Guatemala City with 2 crew members on board. Shortly after takeoff, the aircraft's left hydraulic system failed. Without it, our pilots had no auto brakes, no nose wheel steering, and only one working thrust reverser. They declared a mayday and prepared for an emergency landing. However, as the plane touched down and tried to stop, things took a turn for the worse.
Uy, madre santa, mae. Uy, mae.
The left engine suddenly spooled up to full power. The asymmetric thrust yanked the 757 into an uncontrollable right turn. It skidded off the runway and slid down an embankment, which caused the fuselage to snap in half. Thankfully, both pilots walked away without serious injuries. Investigators later concluded the captain likely nudged the left throttle forward out of muscle memory while pulling back the right reverser. What initiated the whole chain of events was a worn-out hydraulic hose that Boeing had recommended replacing over 20 years earlier. November 11th of 2019 was a rough day to fly into Chicago. A heavy snowstorm had blanketed O'Hare International Airport, canceling over 1,500 flights across the region. Despite the poor conditions, our pilots at Envoy Air in their ERJ-145 decided to push through. They had already attempted one landing before ATC told them to go around, and a SkyWest flight ahead of them did the same before diverting to another airport entirely. But our crew decided to give it another shot. The tower warned them that the runway was slippery, and it didn't take long for things to go sideways. The right main landing gear collapsed as they slid off the runway, and the wing dropped onto the frozen grass. The runway was immediately shut down, and ATC updated the braking conditions to poor across the board. Courchevel Altiport in the French Alps is one of the most dangerous airports on the planet. The History Channel ranked it the 7th most extreme in the world. The runway is only 1,700 feet long, and there is no go-around procedure, so pilots only get one shot to land. On February 8th of 2019, our pilot learned that lesson the hard way. As he approached Courchevel in his Piper Malibu Mirage, he came in too fast and glided way too long, leaving him with barely any room to stop.
Estoy para ver.
Luckily, out of all things to crash into, it was just a pile of snow which cushioned the impact. All passengers made it out with minor injuries. An investigation that followed revealed that our 23-year-old pilot had obtained his flying license just 2 months earlier. And in the 3 months before the accident, he'd only logged about 10 hours of flying and had completed his Courchevel landing qualification the day before this commercial flight. On February 9th of 2024, a Bombardier Challenger 604 was on approach to Naples Airport in Florida, carrying 2 pilots, 2 passengers, and a flight attendant. But as the crew descended, both engines failed. The jet skidded off the road and slammed into a concrete sound barrier, erupting into flames. Tragically, both pilots were killed, but the flight attendant guided the 2 passengers out through the baggage compartment door, saving their lives. Investigators later traced the failure to corrosion in both engines due to being operated near the ocean, a problem that had shown warning signs just 25 days earlier. Newark Liberty International Airport sits right on top of the New Jersey Turnpike. Planes come in low over 6 lanes of highway traffic every single day. On May 3rd of 2026, one of them got a little too low. plane clipped a light pole on the turnpike and slammed into the cab of a bakery truck cruising along the highway. Thankfully, the driver only suffered minor glass cuts on his arm and hand. Meanwhile, our plane taxied to the gate with a hole in its fuselage and a damaged tire. However, if the plane were any lower, it could have been much worse. John Wayne Airport in Santa Ana, California, is known for having one of the shortest commercial runways in the country. At just 5,700 feet, it's a tight squeeze, even on a good day. On August 20th of 2023, an Alaskan Airlines 737 was inbound from Seattle. Tropical Storm Hillary was hammering Southern California with heavy rain and rogue winds. Pilots usually put the plane down harder in wet conditions to prevent hydroskidding and get a better grip. The passengers were expecting that, just not this rough. Passengers watched as the engine scraped the ground and sparks flew past the windows. The entire gear assembly punched through the top of the wing. Thankfully, the plane came to a stop on the runway and nobody was hurt. There's an old saying in aviation, no pilot has ever regretted a go-around. It's one of the first things they drill into you during flight school. On September 23rd of 2023, an Il-76 operated by the Malian Air Force, packed with troops and supplies, was already over halfway down the runway. Still, our pilot decided to touch down, but it was too late. The Il-76 rolled off the runway and broke apart as it dropped off an embankment. Sadly, the crash was not survivable. According to a report, as many as 140 people were on board. On January 2nd of 2024, Japan Airlines Flight 516 had 379 passengers and crew aboard when it attempted to land at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. Meanwhile, a Japan Coast Guard Dash 8 was preparing for takeoff to assist with rescues after a horrific earthquake had rocked Japan on New Year's Day. The Dash 8 was instructed to taxi to the holding point at the runway and wait while the A350 lands, but the crew misunderstood and thought they had clearance, so they rolled right onto the active runway. Smoke filled the A350 cabin almost immediately. The intercom was dead, so flight attendants grabbed megaphones and directed passengers to the emergency exits. Thankfully, all 379 people made it out alive. It was nothing short of a miracle. Sadly, 5 of the 6 Coast Guard crew members didn't make it out. Only the captain survived, though suffering serious burns. Every summer, thousands of aviation fans flock to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for AirVenture, one of the biggest air shows in the world. On the morning of July 28, 2011, an Alabama Air National Guard F-16 came in for a landing on the north runway. However, the crowd got more than they bargained for. Our pilot ran right off the end of the runway at 60 miles per hour. The front landing gear sank straight into the mud and broke under the stress. A later investigation identified the cause to have been a fogged-up canopy. Our pilot simply couldn't see. The Grumman TBM Avenger is a World War II legend. It first saw combat at the Battle of Midway in 1942 and spent the rest of the war sinking Japanese warships across the Pacific. Even the former President George Bush flew one. On April 17th of 2021, one of those old warbirds was performing at the Cocoa Beach Air Show in Florida. The Avenger had just returned to the skies after an 18-year restoration when its engine cut out. Our pilot initially aimed for the nearby Patrick Space Force Base, but to get there, he'd have to fly over buildings and a busy state road. He made the call to put her down in the ocean instead. 18 years of restoration and 1 year of flying, all to end with a swim. If you enjoyed this video and want to see another one just like it, be sure to click a video on screen now. Thanks for watching, and be sure to tune in next time.